a privilege and an honor to introduce our next speakers this morning. We have Peter Gerhardt and Angela Rodriguez. They are gods in this field. They have been at this work, Peter, for longer than I've known the word autism, and they have been champions of well-being across the lifetime throughout their careers. They work at a school now here in New Jersey, and so I get to visit them quite often, and from the beginnings of Proof Positive and before have been champions of this work. When I got my graduate degree in positive psychology 15 years ago, Peter was one of the first phone calls I made. Have we lost Peter?
Somebody,
They're back.
that was awkward. Yeah, I wonder where.
They'll come back.
They'll come back.
Enter backstage.
Oh, I wonder if he forwarded that login to somebody. May have happened. That person that just came on.
Who quickly did not want to be the person
presenting.
She did not have the slides. We're going to do a lot of tech today.
Yeah, we have it. And oops. Yep. They may. Oh, there we come back. Hi.
Hi.
Who did we get to see? That was exciting. That was so exciting.
The good news is
trying to keep you on your feet. It's
I'm like, hi, are you presenting? Because they're the Angela and Peter, like, we're out.
she could not find the leave button fast enough. So Angela, pop your slides back up. And without further ado, Peter and Angela are amazing. When I first got my degree in pos psych, there were people in the autism community that very directly told me there was no place for happiness in autism intervention. And I called Peter, who was a friend and a mentor, and told him what I was up to. And he immediately, within seconds, went, whoa, this is the future of the autism community. Of course, there's a place here. So he's championed this work. Angela is part of our inaugural collaborator series, Learning Institute. So she has been a champion of the science and skills of happiness as well. And we're just honored to have you guys here. So thanks for being here. Over to you.
for having us.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peter Gerhardt, in case you're confused about who's who. Yeah, this is Angela to my right. First, we just want to talk a little bit about the EPIC programs, just very, very quickly. We are an ABA-based school for kids with autism spectrum disorders, but kids who fall more into the profound autism category. We're ages 3 to 21, but our youngest right now is 5 years old. We are a very child-centered program, as well as a very community-based program. Even our youngest learners have some community-based instruction, because the theory being that their typical brother or sister is out there with mom and dad learning how to be in the community at that age too. So why shouldn't they have that opportunity? We also have an adult program, which is EPIC Inclusive Communities, which is for 21 plus. We're located in Saddlebrook, New Jersey. We have 9 adults right now that we're working with, and just like the school, it's a community-based program where people come in the morning, but then they scatter throughout the day to go to different activities and do different things. So we really try to focus throughout both programs on happiness. One of the measures that we look at, how quickly do our kids get off the bus and come into the program in the morning? Like, do they want to be here? Are they smiling when they get here? Like, we're not so much concerned about, are they walking nicely? Or do they have their hands down at their side? Or are they quickly climbing the stairs? No, we really just want them to be happy when they come to see us, because when you're happy, you learn better. When you're happy, you feel better. So we really put a big emphasis on how happy our students are, and with that also how happy our staff are. Staff, oddly enough, I think it's harder to make sure that staff are happy, because they bring a lot of outside baggage with them, where we can often control some of the baggage stuff with our students, but still, that's our overall goal. So, want to start the actual talk with talking about adult outcomes. Do you have anything you want to add about the school?
No, just wonderful place to be. Our students here, like Peter said, are happy. And it's an honor to be in a program where we can do what we need to do to make sure that our students reach that goal in life. So,
by the way, I was told I can't curse during this presentation. So if I stutter or like, that's because I'm trying not to curse. Adulthood is like going to the vet and we're all dogs and expected to the car ride. We were going to go someplace fun and didn't realize where we were going. If you think back to when you were a kid, you're like, oh, I can't wait to be an adult. Like, I can stay up as late as I want, or I can have ice cream for dinner. And you know what? That's all true. But the fact is, adulthood is hard. You know, and we have so underestimated the potential for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities as a field in general to lead engaged, included, and happy lives. I think one of the biggest challenges we face as kids get older is they start to get bored with what we're doing. You know, and we're teaching different stuff, but we're teaching it the same way, at the same desk, with hopefully the same people. And you know, after a while, I think that has to get a little frustrating. I also think probably if you're an individual on the spectrum and you're in a school like ours, one of the things that must be somewhat frustrating is that every time you master an IEP goal, we give you a new IEP goal. So unless you really focus on what we do, which is a meaningful curriculum, and we'll talk a little bit about that, you end up teaching a lot of things that have no direct impact on the person's life. The example I can use is I had 5 years of Spanish. I can't speak Spanish. I can understand Spanish, but I can't speak Spanish. But I also had a lot of other skills to compensate that I could learn just by being in situations and not having to have direct instruction. All those life skills that I learned just by engaging in life. So my argument or our argument is why are we going to spend 5 years teaching Spanish if you're not going to speak Spanish? So what we really want to do is make sure that you're learning stuff that's meaningful and important and relevant to you. And that actually adds to your level of comfort and quality of life, which we'll talk about. This is from a paper I wrote in 2011 with Eileen Lehner, who used to be with Next with Autism. Unfortunately, the employment day, community, and residential needs of these individuals on the spectrum continue to far exceed the available resources, leaving a generation of individuals with autism and their families in programmatic, financial, and personal limbo. Now, that we wrote 15 years ago. The question is, how much have things changed in the ensuing 15 years? Well, 2025 paper, although early intervention for children has improved, adult services remain crucially inadequate, resulting in a so-called care cliff, where support roughly ends after childhood. This gap in adult services is now urgent. Over 70% of autistic individuals in the US are adults, yet most services are still child-focused. This is from the Lancet. So in those 16 years, not much has really changed in terms of what we do in terms of adult outcomes. So it's really up to us to actually change how we do things so that we are providing lives of what we call competence, dignity, and quality. And I'm going to add happiness to that mix too, because I think that that's, you can add that in as a separate quality, not just an outcome. So, excuse me. So more data out of Paul Shattuck's group when he was at Drexel University, based on data from the National Longitudinal Transition Study and the National Survey of Children's Health, National Survey of Children's Health in 2016. About 1 in 3 teens with ASD cannot go to places outside the home very well or are not allowed to do so at all. Now, this is across the spectrum. So this is including those individuals who are very high language based, what we would call today Autism 1. So across the spectrum, we're really not doing great with this. Almost 2/3 of people with ASD were taking prescription medications, and nearly 46% were taking medications for attention, behavior, or mood. Thank you. These rates are much higher than for individuals with just an intellectual disability alone. So we are medicating people with autism spectrum disorders at a higher rate than we're medicating people with just an intellectual disability. Now, we don't necessarily know what that means. It may mean that having an autism spectrum disorder means that you have a higher prevalence of co-occurring secondary psychiatric disorders. So these numbers may be good, actually, that more people are getting meds that they need, but that's an assumption that's yet to be proven. I think it's more that we continue to look at medication as sort of the silver bullet. Even those of us in the field of behavior analysis often will defer when we think that there's a mental health issue to a psychiatrist or neurologist, as opposed to actually looking at our research and saying, well, we can actually help with this. We can do behavior relaxation. We can do a lot of stuff. Just like having an environment that is routinized and scheduled, and so people know what are coming next, and developing a relationship where there's trust and understanding. Like all of those things can help independent of your psychiatric disorder label. So about 1 in 6, 16%, did not receive needed health care. This is the crisis on the horizon. Access to adequate health care, especially for adults. Children who are still on their parents' health insurance, and they can be on their health insurance up to, I believe, age 26 now. They tend to have better health care than do adults who are now on Medicaid. Because a lot of providers don't take Medicaid. If they do take Medicaid, they get paid less than they do with traditional insurance options. It's very difficult to find physicians with experience with adults on the spectrum. So a lot of people do not get the health care they need. There's actually some research that a fairly significant percentage of individuals, adults, get at least some of their healthcare needs met through emergency rooms, because we don't do good preventative care. So we end up in situations where this person needs to be in an ER. That's not good healthcare, nor is it good use of ER resources. So 1 in 4 households of teens with ASD received or participated in some form of public assistance. We tend to think that money is not an object with many of our individuals. Well, that's a real problem for a lot of our families that are out there. Autism cuts across all socioeconomic strata, so that's a real problem. And then 23 to 33% of teens with ASD live in a household that receives supplemental nutrition programs, SNAP programs, also known as food stamps, within the previous 2 years. So it's a broad swath of people who are out there who are in need of our services. And when we're talking about happiness, we're dealing with situations where they're already at sort of a happiness deficit, because they're not receiving any of the services, they're not receiving the healthcare they need, they're not receiving the education that they need, and they're possibly being over-medicated. So that's a bit of a problem. Probably should be talking about quality of life. Of all the potential indicators, all the potential measurements in the field of ABA, services to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, the most challenging is that is quality of life. Because while there are some universal components of a positive quality of life, food security, shelter, emotional and social connectedness, there are many more that are highly individualized and idiosyncratic. I was thinking when the previous speaker was asked about like their jolts of joy, their positives, what my positives would be. And I can easily say, well, there are my dogs and art. I was just down at Association for Professional Behavior Analyst conference down in New Orleans, and one of my favorite artists is a man named George Rodriguez, who actually became popular with a series of paintings called Blue Dog paintings, in which his dog had died. And then he said a series of paintings where the dog was trying to get back to him, and it kept ending up in other famous paintings. So there'd be a Matisse painting with a blue dog in it, and there would be a Seurat painting, and there'd be a blue dog in it. So he was like kind of a master forger and a master innovator at the same time. But I just love his work. And he's from New Orleans, so the hotel we were at had huge blue dog statue and a piano that was all done in blue dog, and it just made me smile. That's all. Now, other people who don't have that connection to his work aren't going to have that because it's all idiosyncratic. But many of these things are just purely individualized and idiosyncratic. Although I'm sure everybody would love my dogs. That's what I just want. I want to say that. Core quality of life domains, psychological being and health. I had a counseling professor in graduate school, counseling psych professor, who said, people say, well, as long as you have your health. And he said, and that's BS. He said, it's as long as you have your mental health. He said, you can have end stage cancer, but if your mental health is positive, you will deal. He said, if your mental health is not positive and you get a hangnail, chances are you're going to fall apart. So we as a country do not prioritize mental health outside of medication. But I think it is such an important thing. And by the way, this is one of those things that I'm speaking as someone who's on multiple medications, but still isn't back in counseling yet. So it really is prompting me to get back into counseling, I think, back into therapy, because I think that would be a good thing for me in terms of my personal well-being. So personal level of independence, how well you can do things in your life, preferred social relationships. I know a lot of people, but I have preferred social relationships with maybe 5, 2 of whom are your hosts for this conference. One is sitting next to me. It's a really small group who really improve my quality of life because of who they are and what they do for me. Preferred physical environments, being in a place that you want to be, that you like, that is comfortable for you, that is engaging for you. If you went to my house, you would see lots of artwork everywhere, because that's part of what I need for a preferred physical environment. Comfort with spirituality and personal beliefs, whatever they may be. It's really, as long as they work for you, they work for you. And this is an area that we don't talk a lot with autism and intellectual disabilities, is what do they have as a personal belief system? And these all need to be measured using both subjective and objective measures. And I'll talk about that in a second. Much of the research looking at quality of life is third-person reports. Yes, there's some research done with individuals who are autism 1, high verbal individuals, where they report their own criteria for quality of life. In all of the research, individuals with autism tend to report a lower quality of life than their typical peers do. One of the questions may be, however, are we using a measure that doesn't look at autism quality of life, but actually looks at neurotypical quality of life? So I know there are some places right now that are working on developing tools that measure quality of life from an autistic perspective, and I think that that's essential. But it's a very difficult subject for us to really talk about and have really good data on right now. But more directly, when it comes to quality of life, We all want or need to be safe from harm. That's a given. To have a place to live. That's a given. To have a job or the resources needed to keep warm or well fed. Good physical and mental health, intimate relationships, friends, be a member of a social community, interpersonal respect, to feel that people respect you for what you do or who you are. But then choice and personal competence. If you look at all the research on quality of life, it comes down to three basic things: choice, control, and competence. We all want choice in our life, we all want control in our life, and we all want to do something that we feel competent at. The relationship between a sense of control, whether real or perceived, in one's quality of life is pretty well established. If you have a bad day, chances are you go home and say to your spouse, lover, friend, dog, whoever, oh, things were so out of control today. Because we value a sense of control. Sense of control is a pivotal contributing factor to a wide variety of behaviors, including intellectual performance and coping with stress, and to both mental and physical well-being, which are essential elements of quality of life. Control is central. There's actually some interesting research looking at if you have a driver and a passenger in a car, and they're supposed to be somewhere at 9 o'clock, and it's 8:55, and all of a sudden they hit traffic, and now they're going to be late. The driver tends to get more upset than the passenger does. The reason being is that the driver had a perceived sense of control. Like they were the one responsible for getting there on time, and now they can't, and they think they should be able to, but they can't because of traffic. But the passenger never had control. So therefore, they're like, oh, well, we'll get there when we get there. So now, that's a generalization, but still, you need to know what I'm talking about. Choice. Oh my God, choice. Silly. The relationship between having valued choices and one's quality of life is well established. I'm still very, very good friends with my ex-girlfriend. Now we talk almost every night. But I find it interesting that almost every night one of the questions we ask is, so what are you doing for dinner tonight? Right? Because it's one of those choice things that we all have that we can talk about, and what we have is important to each one of us. You know, I can look in the refrigerator and there are the things to make 7 different meals and go, oh, there's nothing to make, just because it wasn't what I chose to have. And if you don't believe how important choice is, at least to the American consumer, next time you're at the supermarket, just stop and look at how many different brands and types of toilet paper there are. And people are committed to their brand of toilet paper and will not buy another one unless it's under duress. We value choice, and it's integral to our quality of life, having choice in our lives. Choice by individuals in the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities has been enshrined as a fundamental human right by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. Historically, however, individuals with IDD have been denied access to choice-making opportunities, both big and small, that may have impacted their lives. When I started in the field, lunch was at a certain time and everybody had the same lunch, and dinner was at a certain time and everybody had the same dinner, and everybody had a bedtime. And these are all adults. Now, one thing that I do like about being an adult is that I don't have a prescribed bedtime, and I don't even have to eat dinner, and I get to choose what I have to have for dinner, or I can skip lunch, or I can have a different lunch, or I don't have to. It's like, that's what choice all comes into all this. And for the longest time, folks on the spectrum weren't given choice, and choice is so important. There's even an argument that's made that poor adult outcomes for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities across life domains is a result of never having been taught to make real choices. They haven't been taught to really advocate for themselves. So they're left just accepting what's given because that's what they've been taught to do, to just take what, this is the option we have. So therefore, this is all you can do. So, and incompetence. Now, this one's a little harder to sort of equate, but the relationship between competence and quality of life is more challenging to document. To start with the word competence in the IDD, literature is generally used to refer to a set of behaviors and not a general concept of competence. So it's really core competencies. So we talk about it from an academic perspective. There's research on a positive quality of life having positive impact on the development of competence, which is informative. And there's some research that promotes happiness at work, improves personal confidence. Still, there is a face validity argument, which this is it, which is pretty straightforward. Perception of personal competence is most likely highly preferred. Learners with IDD are not able to consistently access the condition of competence under the condition of instruction. They're constantly being instructed in something new. Increased demonstrations of competence should result in a reduction of the response effort required to perform a skill. Decreased response effort tends to be associated with increased preference for the now easier task. Increased competence results in increased access to potential reinforcing conditions. Regular access to potentially reinforcing conditions promotes a sense of well-being. In other words, a positive quality of life. Ergo, perceptions or actual competence are integrals to positive quality of life. Now, when I first started in this field a long time ago, when I would tell people that I worked with kids with autism at the time, first of all, nobody knew what autism was, so I'd have to explain what I did. But I almost always got some response that was something like, "Oh, that must be so hard." And I would always be, "No, it's not really. You know, oh, you must have so much patience." "No, I really don't." "Oh, you're such an angel." I'm like, "I am not an angel. I am so far away from an angel that the reason I do what I do, and no false modesty, I'm good at it. That's why I'm competent. Like, if you're not competent at this job, if you're not Angela Rodriguez, it'll burn you out in a week. Like, you need to be good at this job to be able to feel good about it." So competence plays a huge role here. There's a whole bunch of factors that can negatively impact adult quality of life. I just want to point out where it says exercise, is like exercise doesn't impact it negatively. It's that lack of exercise is really what it is. But these are all pretty straightforward, and I want to make sure that I give Angela time to talk. But I want to end with this one individual with unconditional positive regard, or if you're a behavior analyst out there, dense non-contingent reinforcement. A few years ago, we realized that under typical classroom conditions, most vocal verbal responses, praise statements, "Good job. Oh, I appreciate that. That was great working, man. I really appreciate that," were only in response to compliance with a demand or a request. "John, hand me the napkin. Thank you. I appreciate that, man. That was great." You never got reinforced just for being you. At that point, we implemented an intervention involving delivery of vocal praise statements with enthusiastic positive interactions from one of the students at our life skills house, which is our transition program. The student had a long-standing history of significant aggression. Initially, he was baselined at 5 aggressive episodes a day that required some form of physical intervention. At this point, he had acquired a functional alternative behavior. He would rip up cardboard boxes instead of aggression. That would reduce the frequency of aggression towards staff by about 50%, went from 2 episodes a week to 1 episode a week. Over the next 24 months, once we implemented this non-contingent reinforcement, this unconditional positive regard, and what would happen literally, he would get off the bus in the morning and people would be outside and give him a round of applause and say, "Welcome, it's so good to see you today. I love that shirt." We implemented a whole bunch of choices in his life. So when it was time for him to actually start using deodorant, it was past time to start using deodorant. But he was taken to the store and they were given choices of what sort of deodorant to use, because that's another thing that people have very specific preferences about. So what did he want to smell like? He also had sort of a crush on another student. So we emphasized that, like, well, she likes it if you smell better. So we worked with him through that. And by doing it that way, he saw the value or the meaningfulness in using deodorant. So it no longer became an instructional thing, just part of what he did. But over the next 24 months, the inter-response interval went from a maximum of 3 days without aggression to just over 7 months without aggression. And no other variables were changed. I am going to just talk about maybe over simplistic. We are here to help others pursue happiness. We first need to identify what makes them happy. This is out of Denny Reed's program down in South Carolina. Individuals who can communicate their wants and needs, it's relatively easy. Those who aren't, it's up to us to give them exposure to different activities and opportunities and preferences so that they can tell us what they think is the best thing for them or what they like or don't like. So figuring out what makes somebody happy may simply include asking the individual, or it may include doing a deep dive. We talk about like doing it 5 times. So the example I always use, I don't know why, but it's bowling. So I think somebody might like bowling. I'm going to go bowling 5 times. And if at the end of bowling, I'm still having to prompt him for every move to make while bowling, chances are it doesn't make him or her happy. And we might want to find something else for him. And I will end with this. At the core of what EPIC does is a meaningful curriculum. And a meaningful curriculum is one that's individualized, inclusive of the individual's unique needs and interests, and focused on building independence in current and future environments. A meaningful curriculum addresses an individual's needs and prioritizes instructional programs based on what is potentially most important to their lives and not simply a somewhat arbitrary list of isolated skills. A meaningful curriculum is one that puts emphasis on skill acquisition outside the classroom as it does on skill acquisition outside the classroom or school. Meaningful curriculum is one that has meaning for the person so that they end up with a set of usable skills, not just the skills that they can display on demand. And I will give it to Angela.
Thank you. So I want to discuss a little bit about how do we make all of these things happen? You know, when we get to adulthood, how did we get to adulthood in a place where we are practicing happiness skills, where we do feel, our students feel that they do have autonomy and choice? So this is some of the stuff that we do at EPIC. So first and foremost, EPIC made a commitment a few years ago to join with Proof Positive and really understand how to practice the skills of well-being. We've learned about positive psychology. We took the time to teach our staff about how to practice well-being. We really identified that if they didn't understand it, how were we going to teach it to our students? We practice jolts of joy here, as we've discussed, throughout the day. Today for World Happiness Day, I have one classroom doing a whipped cream party. Another classroom is making collages of their favorite musicians and places to go. So we really encourage those opportunities for our students and our staff to do these things together. It's not just watching my students cut and paste collage pictures. It's I'm making a collage, you make a collage. Hey, do we have any interests together? Let's talk about this. Where can we connect? Because that's part of developing that relationship within the Perma Plus that we've learned about. We make it a point to identify our student and staff strengths. As soon as the staff starts here at EPIC, we say to them, we have them take a survey, a VIA survey that will generate a list of strengths. And we have them write down their top 3 strengths. They present it to us and they talk about those strengths as we get to know them as staff. Same thing with our students. We, with the students that we sat with our students and we took those surveys together. With other students who maybe were not as communicative for us, we really took the information that we knew about them in watching their behavior and, looked at the different strengths and said, hey, you know what? This student is really organized, really wants things in a specific place, is really artistic. I think a strength for this student is that they have an appreciation of beauty. And then we look at that appreciation of beauty and we say, okay, in what other areas do we use this appreciation of beauty? So that has been, the most positive thing that we've done here, as it's really gotten us to think about all of these skills that we've learned. Our students want to be here. This is the number one thing for me personally here, is that our students want to be here. If I start to see that a student is having a difficult time coming off the bus, that's a cue to me. Why don't they want to come off the bus? If students, if I hear parents saying, they didn't want to come in today, or they're crying, or even here seeing challenging behavior increase. We are doing something wrong because our students don't want to be here. So we need to make sure that we implement procedures where that is the number one thing that happens. Peter mentioned before about our arrival routines. For me, knowing that we hit this goal of our students wanting to be here is when a parent says to me, on Saturdays, he runs to the front door and puts his backpack on because he wants to go to school. Or whenever we're on vacation, the first thing he says in the morning is bus. That's telling me that they want to be here, and that just tells me job well done. But let's keep going. We talk about compassion and trust here. We need our students to trust us. Trust is a fundamental human right in relationships. You need to trust the people that you're with, especially in this field. People are in and out of your life. So therefore, we try to set up systems that can carry over across people because that's the situation that we're in. And through that, we use visuals. You know, visuals are constant. If I show you this visual, if we present a first then board and this is what I say is happening, that is what is going to happen. That is how I'm going to develop that trust with you. We talk a lot with our staff about allowing context to drive our interactions rather than data or our own agendas. So if I have a student that is particularly not feeling well, it's not a good day to work on tolerating a medical exam. You're not feeling well, let's do a jolt of joy instead. We really have to take in those cues from our students and know what those cues are. So again, that's taking that time during developing relationships to be able to know when we need to put aside our agendas and really look at what is it that the student needs at this time. It's important to us that our students can tell us what they want, what they need, what makes them happy. So choice and autonomy is on the forefront of what we teach our students to have here. We do this really well, and it makes me really proud that we do this here. If a student says no, we respect that. Okay, we were supposed to go to Target, and we have to get your lunch groceries for today, but you just told me no when I said it's time to go to Target. Okay, we'll figure something else out. Maybe we have to get on Instacart. Maybe somebody else will go. But you told me no. There's a reason for that, and we're going to respect that. And that allows us to be successful. And again, it shows our students that what I say matters, even though there may be other agendas. We provide schedules. We let our students know what's happening that day, maybe the next day, even a week from now. Most of our students can look at their weekly calendar to understand, all right, I'm not going to 7-Eleven until Thursday, but Friday I get to go to McDonald's, and we can talk about that every day. They have choice in their schedules throughout the day. So I don't need a student to do a math program at 9:10 every day. If a student wants to do that math program at 2:15 and they want to do, something else in the morning, they have the right to choose that. We teach them those skills. If it is something that we have to get done, we'll say to them, okay, you know what? We're going to give it 5 minutes, but then we have to get back to this. But if we can get this done, then we'll do something else. So we really try to work on that and respect that. As Peter mentioned with self-care and hygiene practices, we hear a lot of our students have a difficult time practicing self-care and hygiene because they don't know that their teeth need to be cleaned or they'll get cavities, or they don't understand that their clothes are on backwards. However, in implementing these procedures of us really teaching our students, wow, it's really great to smell good. It's really cool to have a cool shirt on. We had a student who was throwing away his clothes. And his parents were like, I don't understand what's going on. I go into his room, I open his drawer, his t-shirts are gone. And then we said, you know what? why don't you take him shopping and let him pick his clothes? He ended up picking a brand of clothing that was the same brand that a teacher that he has a close relationship to wears himself. And that got him so much attention, and he looks great, and he was just really proud of himself and what he had. So again, we engage in self-care and hygiene practices because we want to feel good. We want to smell good. We want others to tell us we look good. Let's teach our kids those skills as well. We honor communication expressed through many means. Yes, do we want our students to communicate with us appropriately and communicate in a way that others can understand? However, those are steps that we need to get to, right? We honor those building blocks that get us to what our students want and need. And then a big thing, and if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about our critical skills, is really teaching the hard skills early so that our students have time to master these skills, practice these skills, apply these skills, so they don't have to depend on the decisions and actions of another person to determine their well-being. Our students all have community access. When Peter started here at Epic, I remember him saying to me that access to the community is a right, not a privilege. Every student here has the right to be out in the community. So therefore, even our youngest students will participate in community-based instruction. We find it important for our community members to support our students. So our local 7-Eleven, they know our students. So now I can send a student in there by themselves and they can pick out their snack, go to the register, and yeah, they still need help paying, but the man at the register knows my student and can help him out, and my student can come out feeling pride that they did it by themselves, instead of their teacher standing next to them, telling them what to do, prompting them. They just got it done on their own. And that in alone is such a huge accomplishment for our students. All of our students 16 and older have work-based learning opportunities. We've seen programs where programs decide students have too much challenging behavior. They can't go out to participate in work-based learning. We move mountains to find a place for our students. And sometimes, even if that means it's just about that student walking in, saying hello to a supervisor, and then leaving, we take those small steps to lead us to those bigger goals. We had that with a student last year. He started working, was very afraid to start working. We started with 2 minutes. 2 minutes walking into the library, we left. Another few minutes walking in, saying hi to the supervisor, we left. He now works at the library for an hour and a half. It's been a wonderful experience. So absolutely developing a community for our population. People need to know who our students are, what they need, and how they can be supported. We're a partnership. We stress to our families, you are part of our program. You as parents are part of our decision-making process. You as parents are here to lead what we are going to be accomplishing with your child. We have open and honest communication with them, continuous communication, and we also work to tell the families the hard things. Peter tells families this all the time, that we make our money when we have to tell families no. And sometimes it's, we can't do that because we don't believe that the student will benefit from that. And here's why. And let's have a discussion about it. We always have that end goal of happiness. And what we've really found with our families is that that's their end goal as well. We always hear that. I just want them to be happy. So we're all on the same page with that, and that's what we work towards. We have that student first perspective. So we don't try to change our students. Our students engage in stereotypy. So do I. We may have students in our adult program that probably watch little kid cartoons. So we're not going to try to change that. we'll probably try to teach them when is a good place to access those reinforcers versus not. However, who is it for us to say you can't access that bit of joy that brings you? I thought about this when one of my staff members bought me a pair of Rainbow Bright socks. So at 48 years old, my staff knew that I like Rainbow Bright. So therefore, that means that I am still engaging in those behaviors in public because they're things that make me happy. So at some point, I have said Rainbow Bright makes me happy. And that's not something that somebody's tried to change about me. And we shouldn't do that for our students. We have very few behavior plans because sometimes I see behavior plans as plans more for the people working with the students than what the actual student needs. We look at antecedent procedures. Again, our students want to be here. So when we manipulate the environment to work for them, to make sure that our students feel confident, make sure that our students feel proud in what they're doing, and that they can practice independence and autonomy in their lives, we find that challenging behavior is not something that is prevalent in what we're dealing with. How much time do we have left? So here really quick, I'm going to describe our critical skills. So when I spoke earlier, I talked about how it's important that we teach the hard skills early. What we were finding was we were taking in students at the ages of 15, 16. There was one year where Peter made us take 5 students all in the same week that were in that 15, 16-year-old range. These students were not all able to toilet independently. They did not have communication systems. They were not practicing any type of self-management or independence, really reliant on the people around them. And we kept saying to ourselves, how did they get here? How did this happen? This will not happen moving forward. And we developed procedures to make sure that doesn't happen moving forward. We meet with our families and we developed 3 to 5 year plans based off of these critical skills that we've identified for our students. And we sit with families and we say, okay, Johnny is 8 years old. In 3 years, when they are 11, what do their toileting skills look like? What are those goals we need to hit? Because there's a lot that goes into toileting, more than just staying dry or more than just being compliant to someone telling you to go to the bathroom, that we want to make sure our students have well before they start participating in work-based learning. So we have more information on this that we've shared before. But another big one that I love to talk about with families is household participation in chores. A lot of times we ask our families, does your child participate in family celebrations, birthday parties? Do they open Christmas gifts? Is your child going to church? No. Okay, then, is this something that you want for your family, and how can we implement these skills in a way that your child can participate happily, that will also make your family happy? So that's all I have for today.
That's all we have.
Well, first, let me start by saying next year, can we count on you guys for like a 4-hour chunk of this day?
Yeah. No.
Thank you. I wish we had an hour to debrief what you just shared, because you ran the gamut, right? From Denny Reed's original work on happiness indices. How do we observe happiness? How are we looking for it? To toileting. And gave me a whole new metaphor for adulthood is a lot like going to the vet and being a dog in a car. At 44 years old, I get that. I appreciate that, Peter. But where I really want to focus a little is like what you all just did in 50 minutes was actually help us close the gap we opened the day with, right? So I started the day by saying, yeah, Peter, I agree with you. In 16 years, there's been far too little sort of progress and change in the autism community. Simultaneously, the happiness movement has grown tremendously and completely ignored autism, right? So 15 years of World Happiness Reports, the 15th drop today, 0 times has the word autism been mentioned in the happiness conversation globally. So what we know from those reports is that there are some really consistent things that lead to happiness: connection, trust, health, support systems, meaningful participation in family, community. And what you all just did was tell us, hey, it's no different for our students. It's no different for people with autism, but we have got to up the ante on how do we measure that? I mean, Peter, you said it, our quality of life measures are not there. Well, that's on the happiness researchers. That's on us in the pause psych community to go, whoa, we have to expand our understanding of how we measure happiness to include all people, not just neurotypical people. So, and offline, I would love to further explore. You brushed over this idea of like we don't spend a lot of time on personal belief systems and meaning and mattering. And so I would love if you guys will have me. I'll bring you lunch and we can talk about that offline and then record it for everyone else next year. Peter, Angela, thank you, thank you, thank you. The work you're doing is amazing. And the reminder that even the most basic of skills are critical to well-being. And you guys do the hard work of making sure people are equipped and ready to engage in their day.
Well, we couldn't do it without proof positive, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. We will pick back up at the top of the hour. So we've got about 9 or 10 minutes for folks who are sticking with us to take a bio break, grab some coffee, grab some water, and we will be back. The connection, Peter and Angela, between you and our next speaker, who's an Oxford researcher, is unbelievable. So JD looks at strengths in the autism community. And when you were talking about unconditional positive regard, Peter, it's like her work says people just want to be seen. They want to be seen and they want to be valued. They don't want to have to earn it by handing you a napkin. They want to just feel seen. And your protocol or your guidance to your team, just like unconditional positive regard, guys, like see him, see them, tell them they are worthy and valued via who they are is awesome. So when we come back in a few minutes, JD's going to tell us more about how we can prioritize strengths and why strengths are critical in this conversation. So thank you, guys.